Good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha Pozega, and I work at the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority located in Strathroy, Ontario, as the Canadian Remedial Action Plan Coordinator for the St. Clair River Area of Concern. Today, I'll be providing an update on the status of the area of concern here in Canada and briefly discussing some of the work that's been completed to date. For anyone who's not familiar with the Area of Concern program, in 1987, the governments of Canada and the United States recognized 43 sites around the Great Lakes where severe environmental degradation was occurring as a result of human activities. These areas were identified as areas of concern, or AOCs for short, and of the 43 areas of concern, 12 are located in Canada, 26 in the US, and 5 were binational, meaning that they were a shared responsibility between the two countries. Several AOCs align with major cities around the Great Lakes, where there was significant harvesting of natural resources and extensive industrial and urban development in the early 1900s. And the end goal in each area of concern is for all locally defined actions to be completed and for the water body to be removed or delisted from the list of areas of concern. My presentation today will focus on the St. Clair River area of concern. So this is a binational AOC, but my work is focused solely in the Canadian portion. For anyone who's not familiar, the St. Clair River is the receiving water body from Lake Huron and discharges into Lake St. Clair, and it's shown here by the red arrow. The St. Clair River was identified as an area of concern following the discovery and commercialization of oil in the region. Along the Canadian shoreline alone, over 60 large industrial facilities were constructed along a 25-kilometer stretch of the river at Sarnia and Aamjiwnaang First Nation, and it gave the region its nickname Chemical Valley. As industry grew, people flocked to the area in search of work, and this rapid and urban industrial growth ultimately came at the cost of the environment. The boundary of the St. Clair River area of concern stretches the entire 64-kilometer length of the river, which extends from the Blue Water Bridge at Point Edward down to Mitchell's Bay at Lake St. Clair. The St. Clair River is part of the connecting channel between Lake Erie and Lake Huron, so it plays an important role in shipping and navigation, directly influencing both the Canadian and American economies. So 2 First Nation communities that call the east shore of the St. Clair River home are Aamjiwnaang First Nation, located just south of Sarnia, and Walpole Island First Nation, located in the delta where the St. Clair River meets Lake St. Clair. All areas of concern have one or more environmental challenges to address and have been assessed based on 14 beneficial use impairments, or BUIs. In each area of concern, each BUI is evaluated and given a status of either impaired, meaning they do not meet specific quality objectives, or not impaired, meaning that the quality is satisfactory. In instances where there's insufficient data to identify whether a BUI is impaired or not impaired, they're deemed to require further assessment. In order to delist or remove an area of concern, each of the impaired BUIs needs to be addressed, and the actions required to restore the beneficial use impairments are identified in unique remedial action plans. It's important to note that the goal of these remedial action plans is to address the historical consequences of industrial and urban development and to restore the aquatic environment in areas of concern so they're consistent with quality in non-AOC areas around the Great Lakes. While there are new concerns impacting our waterways today, the AOC program is really focused on those legacy issues. In the St. Clair River area of concern, the coordination and implementation of the Remedial Action Plan here in Canada is the responsibility of the Canadian Remedial Action Plan Implementation Committee, or the CRIC, and the binational effort is led by the Binational Public Advisory Council, or BPAC. Canada and the US have taken different approaches to restoring areas of concern, but in the St. Clair River, both sides collaborate and try to align the two programs when feasible, recognizing it's a shared river and therefore a shared responsibility. Extensive effort has been made to restore the St. Clair River in both countries over the past 30 years. To date, 4 of the 14 common BUIs remain impaired in Canada, and 1 requires further assessment. In the US, only 2 impaired BUIs remain. And as you can see in the graphic on the right, in Canada, 7 BUIs have been redesignated to not impaired since 1991, and the most recent redesignation just occurred in June of last year. So these are the impairments that remain to be addressed in the Canadian portion of the St. Clair River area of concern. Once all actions to address a BUI are completed, a report will be written to summarize all available data and the efforts made to advance the BUI. This report will assess whether the delisting criteria have been achieved or if additional action is required. The report is first presented to the Canadian RAP Implementation Committee for support to enter an approved redesignation process. And this process ensures that the public, First Nations, and stakeholders all have their say before the BUI is redesignated. In 2021, 2 draft assessment reports were written, which recommend a not impaired status be adopted for both the degraded fish and wildlife populations and the restrictions on drinking water consumption or taste and odor problems BUIs. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that's being done to restore these BUIs. One of the key remaining remedial actions in the St. Clair River is to manage mercury contaminated sediment in 3 priority areas. So a sediment management committee was established with representatives from Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, Dow Canada, and then the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority oversaw the development of an engineering and design plan commissioned in August 2019. The 3 areas are located along the Canadian shoreline, near the southern end of Sarnia's industrial area and north of Stag Island. The contaminated sediment accumulated over time in shallow water directly adjacent to or near the river shoreline, where barriers like large docks were present or where the flow rate of the river decreased, allowing deposition over time. A remedial objective was set to achieve a surface weighted average concentration, or SWAC, of 3 milligrams per kilogram, which would be protective of local fish based on mercury bioaccumulation considerations. Each priority area was found to have an uneven distribution of contaminated sediment, with some areas having higher concentrations than others, but calculations showed that the 3 milligram per kilogram SWAC could be achieved by targeting areas with higher concentrations of mercury in the top 15 centimeters of sediment. New data collected in 2019 and 2020 show that there's been significant decreases in mercury concentrations in surface sediment compared to historical samples collected between 2001 and 2014. So the highest concentrations were typically buried, and this is an indicator that some natural recovery is actually occurring. The goal of achieving a SWAC of 3 milligrams per kilogram in the top 15 centimeters of sediment has already been achieved without implementing any remedial measures, and there's no measurable risk presented to fish based on the level of mercury contamination in the top 15 centimeters of sediment. Data also showed that there's been an increase in the amount of sediment deposited over time, and that re-exposure of subsurface buried mercury is quite unlikely. Although hydraulic dredging was identified as the preferred approach in 2013, based on the sediment data that was available at the time, the findings from the more recent data indicated that the more appropriate approach would be the construction of an erosion-resistant cover in focused areas to enhance the erosion protection and further decrease mercury concentrations in surface sediment. The use of the erosion-resistant cover would augment the local risk reduction already achieved by further reducing mercury concentrations in the surface sediment and limiting downstream transport of contaminated sediment. Now that the report has been finalized, it will help to support discussions around implementation, the roles and responsibilities of the various parties during the implementation phase, as well as the timing for implementation have not yet been determined. More information and a copy of the final engineering and design report can be found at stclairsediment.ca. Other ongoing work in the AOC includes continued municipal infrastructure upgrades. Over the past 15 years, significant financial investment has been made to upgrade municipal infrastructure, including improved treatment processes at wastewater treatment facilities, the separation of combined sewers, and improved sewer flow management. These upgrades have greatly improved water quality and aesthetics in the St. Clair River. And to date, 2 of the 4 combined sewer outflows have been decommissioned. And of the 40 kilometers of combined sewers that existed in the city in 2004, 20 kilometers have been separated, and an additional 6 kilometers will be separated by 2027. Combined sewer separation work continues in the city of Sarnia and has been identified as top priority in the city's infrastructure asset management plan. With a booming industry along its shores, as mentioned, the St. Clair River was historically regularly impacted by industrial and municipal spills. This graph you see here has been borrowed from a drinking water discussion paper commissioned by the CRIC in 2016 to promote thought and discussion among the public, First Nations, stakeholders, and agencies on several questions, including comfort with the current delisting criteria for the restrictions on drinking water and taste and odor problems BUI. The graph shows a massive decrease in the frequency of industrial spills to the river since the late 1980s. 2 communities draw their drinking water supply from the St. Clair River downstream of Chemical Valley, and historically had frequent interruptions to their drinking water supply due to chemical spills to the river. Through the development and implementation of legislation and other regulatory tools, as well as the use of source controls and systematic improvements at industrial and municipal facilities, spills to the river have become much less common and less severe. Environmental compliance approvals are now required for wastewater dischargers that permit any of their waste to discharge to the river. Facilities are required to have a spills prevention and contingency plan. There's improved operator training at water treatment plants, and we're fortunate to also have active industry participation in the region. This is certainly not a comprehensive list of all of the preventative pieces that have contributed to this reduction in spills, but I think it provides a good idea of the types of actions that have been taken to prevent spills to the river. In addition, the province of Ontario, the city of Sarnia, Aamjiwnaang First Nation, and industry have each implemented community notification systems to spread the word if a spill does occur. And this multi-barrier approach to safeguarding the drinking water supply has proven to be very effective and has virtually eliminated closures of the downstream drinking water intakes, with the most recent intake closure occurring in 2013. Significant efforts have also been made to restore the natural environment. Over the past 20 years, over 280 projects have been completed to improve fish and wildlife habitat within the St. Clair River area of concern. This includes over 50 wetland projects and 12 coastal wetland projects totaling approximately 285 hectares or 704 acres, which greatly exceeds our Canadian goal to rehabilitate, create, or protect 155 hectares of wetland habitat. Many of these projects would not have been possible without the support of local landowners and our community partners, so we're very lucky and grateful to have their continued support. Unfortunately, due to the time constraint today, I can't get to highlight all the great work that's taken place in the Canadian portion of the AOC, but I hope the few examples I've touched on today have piqued your interest in learning more. All of our work over the past 30 years has been well documented, so for anyone seeking more detailed information, I encourage you to visit the publications page on our website. You'll also have the option to sign up for our monthly electronic newsletter or complete our St. Clair River Fish Consumption Survey if that interests you. So that completes my presentation for today. I thank you very much for listening, and I encourage you to reach out if you do have any questions, and enjoy the rest of the conference.